December 1975, Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. It was a time when the biggest worry in the quiet, agricultural communities was the cold bite of winter. But on a single night, that peace was shattered forever. A 19-year-old newlywed, Lindy Sue Biechler, was found brutally stabbed inside her modest apartment on Kloss Drive. For nearly half a century, no one could name her killer. The crime seemed immune to time, slipping further into the depths of a dark, silent past. It became Lancaster County's most painful, enduring mystery, a tragedy that haunted the quiet streets of Mannheim Township. Then in 2022, thanks to a single strand of DNA preserved from the original crime scene, justice finally arrived. This is the story of Lindy Sue Biechler and how science reached across 47 years to speak the truth. Lindy Sue Biechler was full of life, 19 years old, bright, and kind. She had been recently married for just over a year and was working happily at a local flower shop, building a future in her peaceful corner of Pennsylvania. Her life was defined by the simple, comforting rhythm of small-town existence. On the evening of Friday, December 5th, 1975, Lindy returned home from a quick trip to the grocery store, sometime between 6:45 and 7:05 p.m. Grocery bags from John Herr's Market still sat on the dining room table, an image of domestic normalcy violently interrupted. Around 8:30 p.m., Lindy's aunt and uncle stopped by the apartment, intending to exchange recipes. The front door was unlocked, a common courtesy in a safe neighborhood that had now betrayed its trust. Inside, they found a horrific scene. Blood spatter stained the front door and the entranceway wall. Patches of blood marred the carpet, and furniture was violently askew, suggesting a fierce and desperate struggle against a sudden attacker. Lindy was found lying near the kitchen doorway, stabbed an astonishing 19 times in her neck, chest, abdomen, and back. A kitchen knife, one of her own, wrapped with a tea towel, was still protruding from her neck. The sheer brutality suggested a crime driven by rage and a sexual motive. The manner of death was immediately ruled homicide due to massive bleeding. Detectives flooded the small apartment complex, establishing a scene they knew was critical. They meticulously collected every possible piece of trace evidence: fingerprints, hair, fibers, and most importantly, a stained envelope from a stack of Christmas cards that sat on the table. A seemingly insignificant item that would become the central clue decades later. Crucially, they also collected evidence that pointed to a sexual assault, including a sample of semen from the victim's underwear. But in 1975, DNA analysis didn't exist. All they could do was store the evidence, seal it against degradation, and hope technology would one day catch up to the sheer audacity of the crime. Over the following months, detectives launched a massive, exhaustive investigation. They interviewed more than 250 people, co-workers, neighbors, ex-boyfriends, even door-to-door salesmen. They mapped every visitor to the apartment building, every license plate on the street. They investigated Lindy's husband, who was quickly and definitively cleared by a polygraph and later by DNA. They pursued every single lead and rumor, but the killer had left no obvious, identifiable connection to the victim. Nothing pointed to a definitive suspect. The case stalled. It grew cold, leaving the entire community shaken and fearful. How could something so brutal happen in a town so quiet? And how could the killer simply vanish? The lack of answers was as tormenting as the crime itself. Years turned into decades. The original detectives retired, the crime scene photos yellowed, and the evidence was boxed away in the coldest part of the evidence vault, literally placed on ice. Lindy's family carried their grief in silence, unable to truly heal without closure. Her husband, who moved on with his life, never stopped carrying the immense weight of the tragedy. Her cousins and friends kept newspaper clippings and police sketches tucked in scrapbooks, reminders of a solemn promise that someday someone would answer for what happened. The murder of Lindy Sue Biechler became a grim cautionary tale for an entire generation in Lancaster County. The case was reopened several times, in 1997 and again in 2019, as forensic science advanced incrementally. In 1997, the first major breakthrough allowed investigators to retrieve the preserved evidence. They submitted Lindy's underwear from the crime scene for DNA analysis and successfully obtained a male DNA profile based on semen found on the fabric. This was the first true evidence of the perpetrator. In the year 2000, this unique genetic signature was submitted to CODIS, the National Criminal Database, with immense hope. But the killer had never been arrested for a crime requiring a DNA sample. The profile returned no match. The consistent lack of a conventional CODIS hit proved that the killer was not a known felon in the system, forcing investigators back to square one. The case stayed cold, but the cold case unit remained persistent. They recognized that the limitations were not in their effort, but in the available technology. In 2019, recognizing the dead end of CODIS, the team employed DNA phenotyping. They hired Parabon Nanolabs to create a composite sketch based purely on the genetic material left at the scene. The results predicted the killer was fair-skinned, had dark hair, and very likely had hazel eyes. This gave the community a face, but still not a name. The effort, while failing to provide an immediate suspect, kept the case alive and ready for the next technological leap. That leap, the one that would prove to be the most revolutionary, was forensic genetic genealogy. The single strand of semen DNA, that microscopic witness, had outlasted the original investigation, the witnesses, and the limitations of 2 centuries' worth of forensic science. Its moment to speak was finally coming. In late 2021, detectives partnered once more with Parabon Nanolabs, specifically with the firm's chief genetic genealogist, C.C. Moore, a pioneer in the field. Using the small preserved DNA sample, analysts managed to build a comprehensive genetic profile. They then uploaded this profile to a public genealogy site that permitted law enforcement searches looking for distant relatives who had voluntarily submitted their DNA for ancestry purposes. The goal was to find a genetic cousin, a family connection, no matter how distant. This case presented a unique genealogical challenge due to the specific ancestry. The family tree research revealed that the people sharing DNA with the unknown suspect were immigrant families from Catanzaro, a province in southern Italy. Moore realized that historical records showed the vast majority of Italian immigrants in Lancaster County were from one tiny town within that region, Gasparina. This critical geographical and cultural context allowed the genealogist to focus the search like a laser beam, narrowing the massive database pool to a manageable handful of possibilities. Piece by piece, they built a family tree stretching back generations. Through painstaking cross-referencing of the genetic data with public and historical records, like birth certificates, obituaries, and marriage licenses, they were able to locate an individual who fit the geographical location, the age range, and the specific Italian ancestry required: David Sinopoli. Sinopoli had lived in the very same 4-unit apartment building as Lindy Sue in 1975, merely feet away. He was 68 years old now, married, living quietly in East Hempfield Township, and had 0 criminal history. The suspect was, as the district attorney later confirmed, just not on our radar before this genetic evidence. He was a ghost in plain sight. With Sinopoli identified as the primary genealogical lead, detectives needed to obtain a second, modern, abandoned DNA sample to legally confirm the match. They began discreet surveillance on Sinopoli for several months. On February 11, 2022, they spotted their opportunity when he was at the Philadelphia International Airport. As he drank coffee, investigators watched. When he discarded his cup and threw it into a trash can, investigators immediately retrieved it, the crucial piece of evidence that would seal his fate. The coffee cup was submitted to DNA Labs International for rush testing. In April 2022, the results came back. The male contributor's DNA from the coffee cup was a definitive, overwhelming match to the DNA from the 1975 crime scene evidence. Furthermore, a highly specialized analysis of 2 blood spots found on Lindy's pantyhose, also preserved from the scene, confirmed the match. The DNA match statistic was reported to be around 10 trillion to 1. After 47 years, the match was undeniable. The scientific evidence was now speaking the truth. In July 2022, Lancaster County District Attorney Heather Adams announced Sinopoli's arrest. He was charged with criminal homicide and taken into custody at his home without incident. The silence in the press conference room was heavy as Adams spoke. For nearly 5 decades, one family has waited for answers. Today, we can finally say that the wait is over. She went on to express hope that the arrest would finally bring a sense of relief to the community, which had carried the trauma of the unsolved case for nearly 5 decades. The news sent a shockwave through the region. Neighbors who had lived through the terrifying 1970s investigation and who knew the quiet, unassuming Sinopoli were stunned. He was a man who had successfully blended into the background, concealing the secret of a brutal crime he had committed just feet from his own front door. For Lindy Sue's surviving relatives, including her husband and cousins, the arrest didn't erase the pain, but it did end the relentless cycle of questions and uncertainty. Her cousin publicly spoke of the immense sense of relief, stating, "We always believed someone out there knew the truth. Now we do too." The family was deeply moved that their sister's memory was finally honored, and the man responsible was held accountable. In October 2023, David Sinopoli pleaded guilty to third-degree murder, aggravated assault, and burglary, accepting responsibility for his violent act. In a court system governed by 1975 laws, before modern sentencing guidelines existed, he was immediately sentenced to an aggregate prison term of 25 to 50 years. His guilty plea brought a final judicial resolution to the case, sparing Lindy's family the agony of a long and painful trial. The case of Lindy Sue Biechler was officially closed. The case of Lindy Sue Biechler is a profound illustration of the power of technological perseverance and the enduring ethical commitment to justice. From a single envelope found near a dying victim in 1975 to a discarded coffee cup in 2022, justice traveled through time, delivered by the convergence of dedicated detective work and cutting-edge science. This story is a powerful testament to the cold case detectives who diligently stored and cataloged that vital evidence, maintaining the integrity of the chain of custody for nearly half a century, long before they knew what it would be capable of. It is a quiet honor to Lindy Sue's family, who carried the flame of memory and hope for a lifetime. Technology gave voice to evidence that never stopped whispering. Lindy Sue Biechler's story is a reminder that patience, forensic innovation, and the relentless pursuit of the truth can and will outlast even decades of silence. This is the Justice Files, where every solved case proves that the passage of time cannot bury the truth.